هذه الكلمة. الآن راح ننتقل وياكم إلى جلسة تناقش الجلسة دور البرامج الحكومية لتنشيط بيئة ريادة الأعمال. 19 نطاقات، حافز، ساهر لا ساهر ما نحبه، فبادر 19 نطاقات، ريادة، قطوف وغيرها من البرامج الحكومية التي تساعد على ريادة الأعمال. خلونا نرحب بالأستاذ محمد موصلي، مدير هذه الجلسة، مدير أول للانخراط الاستراتيجي في هيئة توليد الوظائف. تفضل أستاذ محمد موصلي. شكرا.
Okay, very interesting day. And first, let me start with a correction that Qutuf is not a government program. I feel like at home. Everybody here is a familiar face. This panel discussion is going to be about innovation and the ecosystem building, and the government role in that innovation in the ecosystem. So I would like to welcome my panelists, Engineer Tuba Terkeli and Mr. John Kilmartin. Please join us here. It's a very strange stage in our transformation and era. Whoever knew we're going to put innovation in the same sentence with government? It was very strange to me. And then having a government public servant leading a panel to learn more from them on how we can play a role together to enable innovation. So I salute the ArabNet for doing this and cooking this nice setup, but in my opinion, very creative. And finally, we are, as government, not on the spot anymore, and we're going to be moderating you in the private sector to educate us. A quick introduction. Engineer Tuba is a co-founder and CEO of Qutuf. Everybody has probably seen Qutuf out there or heard about them. They have a lot of initiatives that, which is a huge list, and maybe later we'll have the chance to listen more from her or visit the booth. But they definitely play a very big role in nudging and enabling or influeceing policy making in the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. They are not only regional but also global. John Kilmartin is also Executive Director of ICT Bahrain Board of Economic Development. And they have a mission in putting Bahrain and promoting it as a regional hub to global technology companies and supporting the startup ecosystem in Bahrain. Very interesting. Inshallah, we'll have a good discussion. Let me start the discussion with a very simple question maybe, but I have this maybe curiosity. Do we think that that entrepreneurship is a characteristic or is it a career? So I'll start with maybe you, John, then we'll move the...
Sorry, not sure you can hear it. I think it's neither, to be honest. I think it comes from recognizing a need. So I think an entrepreneur is born when they see a better way of doing something and they choose to go and implement that better way. So, you know, we've a huge focus right now on telling youngsters that they need to be entrepreneurs and going to university and saying, you need to be an entrepreneur and we need to grow entrepreneurship. But if you look globally, most of the best startups, and actually most of, you know, if you look at all the startups and you look at the age group that start those startups, it's generally somewhere between 30 and 50. And the majority of them are between 35 and 45. And why is that? I think it's because people go through their education, they get their grounding, they go into the workforce, and they see how things are done. They then get that experience and they say, well, I can do this better. And that's where I think it's creating the need. Some people are born as entrepreneurs because they come from maybe a background of maybe their parents have done it, but not all. I think it still comes from identifying a need and solving it.
Okay, very interesting. Tuba, what do you say about that?
Definitely, entrepreneurship is, thank you, Mohammed. It's a lifestyle, it's a choice, and it's a very hard choice. Most of us see the issues that we need to improve and enhance and add value on, but very few of us actually take the risk to make that our life cause. And an entrepreneur is the person who has made that solution their life cause. And here I would like to differentiate between business people and entrepreneurs. There is this common misunderstanding or perhaps misperception that once you open a business, you're an entrepreneur. Yes, it's true that you do take a risk when you open a business, but unless you founded that business on solving a critical problem, and most of the entrepreneurs now at the age groups that John described look out to enhance the social communities within which they function. So if we have bumps on the road, why are there bumps on the road? Why doesn't this get fixed more efficiently? Let me solve the bumps on the road problem and make that my life's choice. People may look at you like you're a bit crazy. So you are taking a set of skills that you have either acquired from your parents or from school, and those most often are not taught in this region, which is a set of skills of constantly raising questions, asking how can I do things better, and taking risk. Risk-taking in itself and having the patience, the tenacity, and the grit to see the result through is what makes an entrepreneur. So it's not a career choice. Actually, when we looked at the global findings of GEM and JEDI, which is the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor and the Global Entrepreneurship Development Index, we found out that only 1% of the global population is capable of being entrepreneurs. So there is this capability that we're overlooking, and we're encouraging the startup culture, which is also very wrong.
Okay, so let me give you the secret behind my question. So I really asked it with a hidden agenda, because I think now we're going through a transformation in government. We all know that, and it feels like that. In order for us, if we're asking now government and now the role of government in enabling innovation in the ecosystem of startups and entrepreneurship, it seems to me that the characteristics of an entrepreneur can also be in an organization maybe, which you've just said the word grit, resilience, maybe continuous prototyping and rapid prototyping and being able to accept change and rapidly change things within the organization, which in most government organizations does not exist. Yeah, very risk averse, and we want to, very prudent about the decisions we make and so on. So would you agree that some characteristics in an entrepreneur are today needed in government? Are they missing? If yes, or no, but if yes, what's our solution now as public servants? What do we do? Are you going to replace us with new people who have entrepreneurial characteristics, or can you infuse it in us somehow?
Well,
you can start, sorry.
So two points here. We call them governors instead of governors. So it's a genre of entrepreneurs that do work in governments, and for corporations we refer to them as intrapreneurs, internal entrepreneurs who transform. Don't worry about the job. You guys have it covered. Okay. What needs to happen, what we need to see more often, is a balance between what the government employees are developing and what in corporations they're doing with the people that are already working in the base economy on. I think the task force formation or private initiative seeking is the missing element. You cannot ask governments to be entrepreneurial because they have to be conservative. They look out for 70 years of strategy, 100 years of strategy, 150 years in some governments. We now have a 2030 vision. So they can do the upper level or the crust. But the work that needs to be done at the grassroots level, which is the execution of how this transformation actually needs to happen, requires fast thinking, quick decision making, very high risk taking, very little resilience to change, and those are definitely not government skill sets that you want developed. You want the government to be protective, sometimes overprotective. You want them to think more on your behalf. So if they don't involve the private sector who know how to execute entrepreneurially, to get those things done, then there will be a problem. So I think the balance is in including private sector more on the execution side and giving them the funds to do so and push things forward. That's my...
John?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept, but I think we're probably asking too much of government. I'll agree with you, to become entrepreneurs. But I think what we need to be asking everybody in society is to be innovative and to be open to change. And what does that mean from a government perspective? And I'll talk more broadly than Bahrain, government in general across the world. I see government's job as creating the environment for entrepreneurship, for business, for society at large. It's to get rid of the roadblocks and be open to listening to people to say, listen, I can't do this because, and then be able to change that. So if we call changing those roadblocks entrepreneurship within government, then that's fine. But it's not, I don't see it the job of government to become entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you. So let me take it down a little bit into root causes, or the roots of us, all of us as citizens or residents of whatever nation we're at. And let's say, okay, but maybe at the roots we should, and then I'll move into innovation and policies later on. But for now, what I'm sensing is maybe us as also human beings, maybe we should have more of what they call growth mindset. Okay, so at very early stages of our lives and our education system, maybe we should introduce the mindset of growth mindset, or the concept of growth mindset, which is acceptance, being open to change, having resilience, saying yes I can do because, and these sentences and these beliefs, and at the same time building the grit and perseverance in our kids and generation. Do you see this playing a big role that can balance between driving and enabling entrepreneurs in the same time? Some of these kids are going to be government officials one day, and they're going to then have government officials who have growth mindset and more acceptance. So what's your take on that, Tuba?
I think terminologies matter. And I agree with John, the word innovation is not mentioned often enough in our curricula. I highly doubt that the first word they learn to spell in grade 3, which is when they do anything above 6 letters, is innovation. And I look at ibtikar as a solution to give as a tool in the hands of the teachers and let them freely innovate with their students. We don't just need the growth mindset. We need design thinking. We need lean management. We need project management skills engineered into our kids' brains early on. Maria Montessori, one of the subjects I studied when I was doing my undergrad, is the absorbent mind. It is true. The Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, told us, till 7, they are like a form that you can shape till age 7. And the absorbent mind literally stops at age 7. Science has proven by the first brain surgeon. So unless we give the discipline and the qualities and the skills we're searching, again, as a government, what is our strategy? Is it to become like India, where everybody knows how either healthcare or IT or business as their 3 life choices? Is it in Saudi that we will only become Aramcans or Sabics or 90% of job seekers today look for a government position? Is this the right outcome we want for our new generation? My personal opinion is no. And I do believe that the National Transformation Program, the Job Creation Council, among many others, should look at what do we want to create out of our kids? And are we feeding them the right information? Are we feeding them the right environment to do so? I think this needs to be done at the grassroots level. Here I would like to add one thing. I sit on the board of the largest group of schools in Turkey, one of Saudi Arabia's investments, Setco Holding Group investments in Turkey. They could not find a school to invest in Saudi because in a country where education is privatized and government gives exceptional support to privatize that sector, an entrepreneur who was 28 years old was able to reach 102 schools in 4 years of span. He's 32 years now. And he has 102 schools of everything from KG till high school. And he was allowed to transform the curricula. So unless, again, I will go back to allowing the private sector, if we don't allow private sector to intervene and put together their innovation in sectors where it's needed most, where growth mindset and creative design and everything else needs to be injected, we won't find the right solutions. That's my
Very
take.
interesting. John?
I'm reminded of a story that Ravi Bellini, he's a Stanford lecturer. He spoke in Bahrain last week at an investor event that we had, and he spoke about his job in Stanford was to not squash the rogue ant. So a rogue ant is the one that goes and creates a new colony. And without the rogue ant, you just have one ant colony. So he and Stanford in general, identify rogue ants. These are the ones that are going to create something new. And that's, at an education level, we need to identify the rogue ants. The kids that come up with different ideas, the kids that stand out a little bit, and not squash them and make them uniform. Because it's the rogue ants that come up with something very, very different. And that's really from educating. That has to start very, very early. There was a piece on BBC
Sorry, I
World.
just want to ask, you're saying rogue ants?
A rogue.
Rogue.
So a rebellious
Okay.
ant. The ant that leaves the colony, goes and starts up a new colony.
Okay.
So, that's the one. They're the kids that at an early age might be seen as troublemakers can sometimes be the ones you really want to pull aside and focus on, because
Like
they're the ones
positive rebels.
they're the rebellious ones. They're the ones to say, listen, this doesn't work. I want to find a new way of doing it. And instead of scolding them and, getting them back in line, celebrate them. Give them a little bit of space and let them run with it and see where. They're not all going to be, fantastic entrepreneurs. Maybe some of them are rebellious. Maybe some of them are just troublemakers. But some of them might be really, really, it might be a really interesting concept. I listened to a report on BBC yesterday where it talked about the importance of the first 3 years of life. And that's the defining factor. They did a study on saying if you track kids' influences in the first 3 years and track it right for 40 years, the kids that had really good experiences early in life had a better life. And life was it's not just, money isn't everything. It's about health. It's about stability. It's about food. It's about, their lives were immeasurably better. So, it's about, we're all focusing on in university students, and we think we can change things at university. It actually happens right down from day one, from the day that you're born. There's an influence on you of what you're going to be, whether your ideas are squashed. or whether you're allowed to actually express them, even if they're wrong. Express your ideas.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Let's maybe move a little bit now to the serious stuff, maybe policy making, and how maybe we are a highly regulated government or region, maybe sometimes when it comes to innovation and enabling it. We had a lot of entrepreneurs today coming up and pitching their ideas, and it was really inspiring to see that. And I'm sure some of them are wondering, or they already know and they can list a lot of things, what would be the policies that if we tweak or enable today, they will be able to thrive and pick up their businesses. And after that, I'm going to ask what are in the contrary, what are the policies that are disabling them actually and not talking to each other, and we should deregulate them. So let's start with the policies that are positive and can enable innovation for these young people. Tuba?
I may look at the totalistic view. Rather than calling them policies, I would look at the enablers, if you don't mind. Okay. What enablers does the government need to provide? I honestly believe that the number one enabler we need to see is the quality of life. If I can't find a single healthy food item today at any given university in Saudi Arabia, cafeterias are only selling chips, packed chocolates, and highly fried foods, and we have an obese nation of about 38% going towards diabetes type 2, and we have psychological issues where divorce rates are about 48% at least once in Riyadh, and other cities it's even more or less. We do have a physical, a psychological challenge, so no matter what enabling policy environment you will have, the output or the people that we get out into the system are with health and psychological challenges will not be able to seek opportunities or push themselves. Today we found there is something called the entrepreneur psyche, the startup psyche, that's being studied all around the world. We don't have what we would like to see, corporate counselors. We don't have any of the required enablers to push people forward. So if I'm a salmon, I will swim. If I'm a rogand, I will advocate. But then the government will, in order to enable me, maybe give me a bankruptcy law, which is being done, give me a proper commercial law, which is being executed, put out a secondary market. The SME Authority, I believe in the 2017 to 2020, will see a great master change and shift in support. But again, if it's not within the total value of how entrepreneurs' lifestyles are impacted, the culture and the support they get from everyone around them, it won't change. So the number one policy, positive policy I would love to see, and I hope is coming out, is buying from entrepreneurs and supporting them 150%. Don't give them 200%. Leave, but at least buy from them as the government. I think that needs to happen. Positive policy that I have seen is now everyone is talking about entrepreneurship. That could be a good thing and that could be a bad thing. Today in the morning we saw a panel where there were 4 very prominent government entities. Each one was talking about their own budgets and their initiatives, but they were not talking in sync. They didn't have joint goals, and everybody is trying to cover their own turf with regards to that could be extremely damaging to the ecosystem. So we need to somehow collaborate more and do more in terms of listening to the whole needs of the value chain, not just in policy.
I really like the link between also the mental wellness and physical wellness to the ecosystem. I like that. John, anything that you'd like to add?
So maybe I'll step it back a little bit, because I don't see policy as being similar to yourself. I don't see it being standing on its own. It's just one element. So EDB, the Economic Development Board of Bahrain, has initiated a startup Bahrain initiative. We're doing it with the community. So the community is the first thing that, you're not alone. It goes to your point that, you want all of government involved, but you also want all of non-government and companies, and so it's a wider pool. So we have 6 pillars that we're looking to work on, and policy and regulation is just one of them. So community is a huge aspect. So changing, the mindset, changing the tendency to think of entrepreneurship in a positive way, and just getting people networking and speaking to each other. Creating more solid infrastructure is the second in terms of incubators and accelerators, which is kind of the normal thing that everybody goes and does. Funding is obviously another one. Education is another pool. Corporates. So how do we bring corporates into it? And the last part is policy and regulation. So while there's policies that we need to change, and we're actively working on policies and things like bankruptcy that we're hopefully going to come out with, making it easier for companies to set up. So it's easier on setup, it's easier on fail, and then some technical, issues around letting companies operating. So it's really taking away the red tape, and that's what we're focused on. But I don't think you can change one policy and say, that's going to change everything. It's not. You have to look at it as a holistic thing. And while policy and regulation is one aspect, you need the other pillars to be operating as well.
Okay, good. So let's pick on that and build on the word infrastructure, maybe, because you just mentioned. So what are maybe the infrastructural important elements that government can enable or invest in, maybe in ICT or whatever, that, for example, in the case of Saudi Arabia, we would love to see something that quick and impactful for rural areas to flourish. Maybe they lack some economic activities, but it does not mean that they cannot, that entrepreneurs there cannot thrive if there is some infrastructural change that happened. I'll keep that with you, and then we'll move to Dubai.
I guess for everybody that's familiar with Bahrain, it's quite a small place, so I think the rural aspect is maybe not as applicable in Bahrain, but in general, I think it's around connectivity. I think, and that's becoming a lot easier, and there's lots of solutions. So while not everywhere doesn't have perfect internet access, it is becoming better. I think that's the first thing that needs to happen. And I think the next thing that needs to be put in place is mentorship. I think, actually maybe the second is inspiration, and then it's about mentorship. So can I get inspired to do this? So can I see somebody from a rural area or get more examples of where success points, and say, well, they're not that different to me, so if they can do it, I can do it. Now it's about how can I connect with like-minded people, and then it's about mentorship, to say, okay, I have an idea, or I have something that I want to do. Is there somebody that I'm inspired and I have the idea, can I actually implement in certain areas? So I might have some of the skills, can I get help with the other skills?
Tuba, I think you know this market very well, and you've got a lot to say about maybe infrastructure.
How much time do we have?
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe.
So I'll
5 more minutes.
Okay, all right. So I'll tackle it from the simplest to the toughest, if you don't mind. The simplest is we just had STC in this floor before us, and they were sharing what they can do for SMEs. I would like to challenge STC, because 5 years I live downtown Jeddah. I have personally written to everyone in the office for one fiber optic to be connected to our accelerator and our homes, which is in the central area of Jeddah. we still don't have it. So we can talk about all the fancy stuff that we can do as corporations, but like John said, the most basic thing, if you look at economies that went from farming to ICT, like Denmark, which I'm very close to, by the way, we deal with Denmark as Kutuf all the time to learn from their and other Scandinavian countries. It is very, very prudent to understand, unless you give the necessary tool, which is a basic. You want ICT, 80% of ICT this morning we were told is owned by non-Saudis, is because they don't have speed of internet. It's that simple. Solve that, it will probably solve at least 20% of the problems. So we don't need a big consultancy group to come tell us with a $3 million study what's needed. It's that simple. Okay, so I'll start with the simplest, and then moving it a little bit up. Please stop competing with the private sector what the private sector is great at. Government officials are not required to have passion for what they're doing. Everybody, as a muwatan, as a citizen, is supposed to have passion and compassion for their fellow citizens and their country, but not necessarily for their job. If you have seen a private citizen that is doing amazing work, whether it's in healthcare, in education, or entrepreneurship, go support them. And that needs to be, so I was just misled and mistook for a government entity. Probably somebody in the government thinks they're giving us a budget for Kutuf. Kutuf is the only private sector-led entity for supporting entrepreneurship till today, simply because nobody can find a single rial. And we, because of our compassion, we've put all our salaries on the table as employees to help develop those entrepreneurs. We give our time mostly for free. The actual booth we have in ArabNet is from our pockets. So we sign on papers of partnerships and affiliations with huge liabilities on our own selves. So you can't ask that from government employees. But once you find them, instead of creating so many accelerators from the government, go support the ones that are doing it already and grow them. Why do you need to reinvent the wheel? The third thing, which is very, very important for us to understand, we have to respect that things in the government take a long time. And we also, as private sector, need to have patience. When the government says, we need to Saudize the sector, very clear instruction, we need to Saudize mobile sector or retail sector. We have to come up with very creative ways of bonding as a unit for that sector to see how we can actually support the government. Privatization is very important, yes, but the private sector needs to understand they need to support the government. I am extremely tired of going to STC Mobile Zain who keep on saying, oh, but we're dealing with HRDF already, or we're working with the government. They themselves don't unite with the private sector entities. When you go to other countries, the corporations themselves have something called corporate entrepreneurship responsibility. Part of their setup, part of their bylaw, part of their corporate governance is ensuring that they buy from SMEs. How can they expect the government to do all the work? Government should, like John said, make the playground even. If we have a 100-mile dash, everybody has the same running ground. That's what the government's role is.
Very applaudable, first of all. And
thank you.
I think very inspiring. I'm just going to close this session with one positive note. And let me ask both of you in 30 seconds each, maybe, if possible. What would you share with us as an achievement that's recently happened, or by you, or something that you are pleasant, or something pleasant that happened in your field and our industry or ecosystem that is worth mentioning, that can give us hope? John.
I'm delighted to be able to come up with two things that have happened recently, and I guess I'm very conscious that Bahrain is small. It's 1.3 million people, so the numbers here may not play in somewhere like Saudi, but I think it's about growth. So there's been two events that we've had recently, and EDB and Startup Bahrain has supported them, but we haven't run them. So it's exactly the model that we want to run. We want other people to do things where they're good at. So Turn8 out of Dubai ran a pitch competition, and 67 teams put in applications. They took 30 through a 2-week program and 9 pitched. Now, the feeling was that a year ago that would have been maybe 10, 15. So there's 67, and teams, they're not individuals, sat down and drafted out a business plan. The other very positive thing is last weekend, Startup Weekend had a competition in Manama, and 70 people attended.
Amazing.
So, you know, it's about building something, and it's just about ideas and creating ideas. And some of those people have come from very, very, very different backgrounds. That's real positivity for me. It's about growing something slowly, but sustained growth.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Very proud of you. Hope.
Oh, hope. We have tons of it. I was in a flight coming to Riyadh at 1 a.m. and there was a young football and young volleyball team, 2 sport teams of Saudi youth on the flight, and they were just doing everything unimaginable on a flight, talking, shouting loud, and energy. We have tons of it. We just need to captivate it and utilize it more positively. So that's one positive thing we did. We partnered with 23 countries to take 14 of those countries. Unfortunately, many are in war, to Denmark to compete globally with their counterparts. When we went there, and I do believe that Arabs are presented as a region. We have to look for markets that are 50 million users and up if we want scalable businesses. And we showcase to them, yes, we're here. It was the first time Scandinavian countries had seen that many Arabs together. We had special security guiding us for the 7 days. We went to 3 different cities in Denmark together with the other nations, 80 nations all in all. That was very positive. And I'll leave you on one last positive note. I stand here in front of you as a private sector, Saudi, Turkish background, citizen of this nation that has established 37 technology startups with my amazing team at Kutuf. And I was recently appointed as the commissioner for businesses for World Business Angels Network for Saudi Arabia. A female representing angel investors in Saudi Arabia is signed by IMF and London Stock Exchange. So that I think female entrepreneurship is going to take off, and we're going to get it done. All the ladies there, we'll take it there. Thank you.
So before we give a final round of applause, I'd like to thank you both, and I hope we used you to convey good knowledge to our audience. And I'd like to also thank one of our audience here, Ms. Wadad Nader, as well. She helped me moderate this. So thank you, and thank you guys. Please go ahead, yes.
Sorry, can I just mention one thing before we finish up? And firstly, thank you very, very much for having me on the panel. But if you want to see what this region is capable of, we have a competition. Seed Stars have a competition. They've run competitions right across the region, and the MENA finals is happening this Thursday in Manama. I think you'll be very surprised with the solutions that you're seeing and the type of companies that are being built from the region. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the region as a whole. And that's, I think, the point that you made, 50 million people. We've got to see ourselves as a region. You cannot build a major company unless you've got a marketplace of 50 million. We've got to see ourselves as a full region to give our startups the ability to actually grow into a size.
That's a great point. All right, thank you again. Thanks. Big round of applause, please. Thank you.
مرحبا. شكرا على هذه الجلسة الملهمة والمثرية للأمانة. مما يذكر أن بعد عرب نت الأخير انطلقت أكثر من 200 شركة ناشئة.